If Oregon wants to get it done with Penn State, there's one thing in particular, they really need to do.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can get a big return. New customers place a $5 bet, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. We'll talk Penn State, we'll talk National Signing Day, then we'll talk Penn State again, jam-packed on a Wednesday. And don't forget, Oregon hoops against USC tonight, trying to start Big Ten play 1-0, a classic Big Ten matchup, Oregon and USC. But Penn State actually is a classic Big Ten opponent. First time since 1995, Oregon and Penn State have squared off on the football field. Last time was Rich Brooks getting the team to the Rose Bowl. They lost to Penn State. So hopefully Dan Lanning and company can give Coach Brooks at least a little bit of payback there. I want that, if nothing more, for the fact that he came on the show and, well, maybe he'd appreciate it. Maybe it's been a long time and time heals all wounds. But if they want to do that, Tyler Warren is the name you need to know, and he needs to have a minimal impact on the game. So Terrence Ferguson just set an Oregon record for career receptions and career receiving touchdowns. He went past some guy named Will Cox, another guy named Ed Dixon. I don't know, some random names they throw out on the broadcast. But just so we're clear, I'm very well aware of who those two guys are. Just want to throw it out there. Don't want the comments to get all jumpy and such. Tyler Warren is a great tight end. If you think Terrence Ferguson's had a good year, he has. He's been exceptional. I've been the leader of the Terrence Ferguson fan club ever since I've been hosting the show, going back to the 2022 football season. When I first covered Oregon games on the pod, I talked about Tiefer, and I was like, yeah, this guy rocks. This guy's really good. Well, Tyler Warren has been vastly more productive so far this season. So Warren for Penn State leads them in receiving yards with 978, receiving touchdowns with 6, and receptions. Now, this is where it gets crazy. This is where this is not normal. This is not your typical normal tight end for Penn State. He has 81 receptions on the year. That's a lot. That's a lot of catches. What do you think the total number of receptions is for the number 2 receiver, regardless of position, on Penn State's team this year? I'll give you 5 seconds. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. It's 35. Tyler Warren has 81 receptions this year. The next guy has 35, not even half. He is their passing game. He is also someone that they will throw into funky formations. Their offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, was at Kansas last season with Lance Leipold and company. He left, and Kansas's offense didn't start playing well until the second half of the season. He's been really good at Penn State. He will get clever, creative, weird, funky formations. He'll snap it to Tyler Warren. He can throw it every now and then. Warren this year has run the ball a handful of times, mostly in the red zone, but he's got 189 yards on the ground and 4 touchdowns. So I'll talk about the Penn State running backs later in the show. But the reason I am so dead set focused for this Oregon defense on Tyler Warren is, number one, the importance to the Penn State offense, particularly the passing game. There's a really good Penn State team when you're talking about running the football. Throwing, they're okay. They're fine. Drew Aller, talk about him more later, but it all starts with Tyler Warren. That's where he wants to go. And the second reason I bring him up as this kind of reason number one, or concern number one for Oregon's defense, is this is reminiscent in some ways of the Michigan game. And by the way, the number 2 receiver for Penn State, Harrison Wallace III, questionable to play. I don't believe he played last week against Maryland. Penn State won that game 44-7 after trailing 7-3 early in the ballgame. Tyler Warren is a guy that does so many different things and is such a huge part of their passing game at the tight end position, with receivers who have been so limited this year. They just haven't really been able. Julian Fleming, the Ohio State transfer, I thought he'd be more involved. He's played in all 12 games for Penn State. He's under 200 yards on the season. Has not been a big part of it. I think about Michigan. And Michigan, the second half of the year, was a much improved football team when Oregon played them. We saw that when they beat Ohio State over the weekend. But Colston Loveland in that game had 7 catches for 112 yards. 112 yards receiving, 7 catches. You knew going into that game, the Michigan passing attack was not very capable. They weren't good. Except when they threw to the ball to number 18. You knew the ball was going there a lot, and still they were able to have some success with it. Now, Michigan, of course, only managed 17 points in that football game. Penn State is a more capable offense than that. I don't know that it's by a ton when you get into these big games, but you look at the numbers, it's not particularly close. Now, against Ohio State, they struggled to move the ball. They struggled all game long, and Oregon could have that sort of defensive performance. But I'd suspect that if we look back and say Oregon played a great defensive game, I don't think it'd be akin to a strategy you'll see from basketball coaches from time to time. When you have a star player on the other side who is just otherworldly good. Let's think Cooper Flagg at Duke. Cooper Flagg hopefully is a future Portland Trailblazer. Fingers crossed. But if you're going up against Duke, there is a school of thought, not every coach subscribes to it, but there's a school of thought of, hey, let's let him get all of his points because he's too hard to stop anyway. Let's focus on the other guys. Let's take them away. And if we do that, one guy can't beat us no matter how good he is. You saw this Dana Altman against Iowa. Against Iowa a couple of years ago in that COVID NCAA tournament. They got the bye because of COVID cancellation against VCU. They play Iowa, and Luka Garza went crazy, but everybody else struggled, and Oregon won the game big. That sort of philosophy doesn't really apply to football because one guy can carry. I watched the Broncos play on Monday Night Football. You know how the Browns were scoring? They kept throwing it to Jerry Jeudy. They said, let's just keep throwing to number 3. Let's just keep going over and over. And Penn State will go back to the well on this guy. So you have to make the Penn State passing attack complete passes to somebody else. Make them get wide receivers involved. They haven't done it consistently this year. It's been Tyler Warren. And so he has to be a central focus for this Oregon defense against Penn State on Saturday if they're going to win the football game. And look, Tyler Warren could have a big day and they could still win. Colston Loveland had a big day and Oregon won by 21 points as a matter of fact. If you let Tyler Warren seriously get rolling, you're not going to have the same outcome as Michigan because Penn State is a significantly better football team. They're a more capable offense. They've got better players across the board, particularly at the quarterback position. Drew Aller is much, much better than Davis Warren. So you take away his top target, I've watched plenty of Penn State this year. I have not seen a quality number 2 target emerge that Drew Aller can rely on third down, on goal-to-go situations. They want to get the ball to number 44. So that is Oregon's top challenge. You've got to find a way to take him out of the offense. Don't let him be a big factor. If you do that, you can have a good defensive day if Tyler Warren goes off. You can. It's harder, but you can do it. If you take Tyler Warren out, you guarantee a great defensive day, the likes of which we saw last week against Washington, which is the sort of game we'd all, of course, love to see. And as I mentioned on yesterday's show, in case you didn't hear it, yes, Oregon should want to win the Big Ten championship game. On Friday's show, I'll talk more about the path and how it looks with where the committee came out in the rankings and whatnot. But long story short, Oregon wants to win the Big Ten championship game. Sounds obvious, isn't always, but that's where we're sitting right now. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. Those are the handles. DMs, mentions, wide open, very open. Today's National Signing Day. Today, as this show is dropping, National Signing Day. Lots of big names. All the ones you need to know, and one that, look, we'll see. We'll see what is Oregon really taking another quarterback? I guess we're just going to have to wait and find out. But I'll talk about everything you need to know for National Signing Day coming up next. after we talk about better together. Do you hate the team you drafted in season-long fantasy, but you want to stay in on the action? Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent and you can play with your friends, not against them. So no jabs about this, that, and the other thing. You're all rooting for the same thing. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend, join the social daily fantasy movement at Better Together. It provides a sense of camaraderie rather than, shall we say, rivalry spirits. That's a much more positive feeling. You can get plenty of that elsewhere, but with Better Together, you can feel that sense of camaraderie, and it enhances the social experience of watching sports. You get to do so with your friends. Daily fantasy sports, it can be fun on your own, but it's better together. Download Better Together now from the App Store. Sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a free $10 entry into any NCAA football or NFL contest. And remember, winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Download Better Together now from the App Store. Sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to play with your friends. Winning alone is fun, but it's better together. All right, well, there have been predictions logged for Oregon to land another quarterback in the class of 2025. We'll see if it happens, but biggest name at the biggest position, or the only name really at the biggest position for Oregon, is Jaron Keawe-Sagapolutele. So he got bumped up to 5-star status by some sites. He's currently verbally committed to Cal, and there just seems to be information popping up on my Twitter feed regularly about, I think it looks like he's going to flip to Oregon. Like, okay, I don't know which quarterback the Oregon coaching staff is not a fan of or doesn't believe in, but it's at least one of them. You can't have all these guys in there, at least not in the long run, at least not forever. Now, the other quarterback that Oregon has in the 2025 class is Achilles Smith Jr. Maybe they're just wanting those guys to battle it out. Like Dante Moore and Austin Novosad probably will in the spring. We'll see what happens once the transfer portal opens. And remember, there's a portal window in the winter. There's a portal window in the spring. They didn't eliminate the spring portal window. That was a discussion, but they did shrink it down. I'll have more thoughts on the portal later on today's show. But JKS, as he's more commonly referred to, because it is a bit of a mouthful to say Jaron Keawe-Sagapolutele, and most people don't work on the pronunciation or take the time to learn it and butcher it anyway. They're probably just going to go with JKS. And you know what? That's fine. That's definitely a name to watch. Another one is Dallas Wilson. So Dallas Wilson's committing early in the day. He might have committed by the time you're listening to or watching the show, depending on when you listen. Don't worry, I appreciate you no matter whether you listen or watch, or when you listen or watch, or where you listen or watch from. So Dallas Wilson is a 5-star wide receiver, one of Oregon's highest rated recruits in the 2025 class. Florida has been making a serious push. He is from the Tampa area, and Billy Napier right now, I understand where your head is going, Duck fans. Florida's not any good. Florida just had maybe the greatest 7-5 season in recent history in college football. Now, that's different than Oregon's second 12-0 season, but there are a lot of extenuating circumstances there. So Oregon can get back into the fold. Lots of things can go back and forth. We all remember the Peyton Bowen situation. He and his brother are still playing at Oklahoma, by the way, for those of you that were curious. And Oregon had him sign, and then it was Notre Dame, and then it was Oklahoma. Like, a lot of crazy things can happen on a national signing day. Kids can decide at the last moment to back out, or the paperwork doesn't go through, or a last-minute offer comes across. Who knows? Who knows? But Dallas Wilson, definitely a name to watch. Another one that I'm curious about is Naeem Offord. My guy Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes doesn't feel great about keeping Naeem Offord, who's currently a verbal commit to the team in Columbus. That, well, let's just say they're not having a great time at this moment. And Offord has been rumored to flip to either Oregon or Auburn. Oregon's got other 5-star defensive backs in the class. Speaking of 5-star DBs, Brandon Finney, an Oregon commit. There have been rumors and rumblings for quite a while that he could flip to Penn State. Michigan was maybe in the fold, but then in a visit he was going to take there, it didn't end up happening. He was on Oregon's campus recently. Would like to see them, between Finney and Offord, would like to see Oregon get at least one of those guys and either keep their 5-star defensive back or get another one if Finney flips elsewhere. But that's a name to think about. And Offord, I mean, it's just been discussed, thought, talked about, written about for a long time. It feels inevitable with him that he's going to flip away from Ohio State. But like I said, there's nothing, absolutely positively nothing, there's guaranteed in college recruiting, especially in 2024. So those are 5-star guys to watch. Lincoln Cure is another one. I talked about him earlier this week. The quote he gave, if you missed it on yesterday's show, was something to the effect of, "I'm a wildcat, but anything could happen." If that happened in the reverse, where a guy was like, if Brandon Finney came out and said, "I'm a duck, but anything could happen," well, all right, that's like the old, yeah, I'm married to my wife at this time. I'm not married, but you get what I'm going for there. She is my wife right now. Like, what's with the right now? Or he's our head coach right now. Well, yeah. Why would you say right now? Because you're hinting at something in the future. That's a name to watch. Jakeem Stewart, 5-star defensive lineman, trending towards USC is what I have heard. But again, don't underestimate the Danimal, who is maybe the hottest coach in all of college football. I'll talk about Ducks versus them here in just a sec. There are other names that could pop up, but those are the biggest ones. Those are all 5-star prospects in the class of 2025. You could see some 2026 buzz as well. Oregon has picked up a couple players. They've got the number 1 2026 class at the moment, so they're getting a head start on that next recruiting cycle. But the 2025 efforts also took a leap forward with Gavin Nix. Gavin Nix flipped from Miami, 4-star linebacker, to Oregon just before signing day. And I know that feels really good to plenty of Oregon fans out there. A few years ago, around this time, Mario Cristobal left Oregon for Miami. And here's Miami, without a conference championship game or playoff appearance since then. Here is Oregon with one conference championship game appearance, another one up on Saturday, and they're going to the college football playoff. Sometimes things have a way of working themselves out. This one certainly has. But not going to do a full breakdown on Nix right now because there's just a lot of things to get to on the show today. But I talked to Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider. Raves, absolutely, positively raves about this kid's film. I've seen a couple of clips. I haven't gone through it in detail or anything, but he was incredibly high on what this guy brings to the table at the linebacker position. So, love seeing them stack up talent at, frankly, any spot, because it's never bad to have talented guys on your roster. I know, big surprising take there, but flipping a guy from Miami always feels a little bit nicer. So, which leads me to this. Did you watch Ducks versus them? If not, I don't know what you're doing. I'm almost as excited every week for Ducks versus them as I am for the actual game. Like, right after the Washington game ended and the 49-21 beatdown came to a close, my first thought was, I can't wait for Ducks versus them. And it delivered. It absolutely delivered again. And the Oregon social team is so good. They are so phenomenally good. Scott Anderson is at the top of that pyramid. I know he's got people under him whose names I don't know. I'd shout them out if I could. They're phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, here's a brief recap of the motivational tactic for this week. Did you see the movie Inglourious Bastards? Great movie. I have seen that movie many a times. Fun fact, I actually got dumped one time watching that movie, but that's neither here nor there. I still love that movie. It's outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. So there is a scene in there. I'm not going to get overly violent, but it involves a baseball bat. It involves a baseball bat. And there's this kind of ominous presentation of it. Of a guy with the bat just in a dark cave, just banging the bat. Pow, pow. They took that scene and made it the centerpiece of this game against Washington. And then at halftime, up 28-14, a guy comes out with a sledgehammer and beats the Washington helmet. I mean, where did they find this Lanning guy? I don't know. But a couple thoughts. First of all, it was awesome. It was worth a watch. It never disappoints. Second of all, on a day like today, what are you trying to do as a program? What's Dan Lanning trying? He's trying to get on kids' radars. He's trying to get them to come to Oregon. Make it a cool thing to come to Oregon. The whole framing of this particular Ducks versus them, by the way, I don't think it was accidental at all. Never is. The title was Dream School. and guys on Oregon's roster now talking about seniors who have played probably, or not definitively, I should say potentially, have played their last game at Autzen Stadium. Those guys reflecting on their careers and what it's meant to be a Duck, what it means to be all of that stuff. You think that messaging, you think that framing of the video that gets tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, millions, I don't even know how many views. I just haven't looked at the most recent one. You think Dan Lanning's trying to get that to resonate with recruits? Like, hey, look at what you got over here. You can come be a part of these things that look cool. And also, look how special it is. Look how behind the scenes we're going to show people, hey, being at Oregon is an awesome place to be. And we love it here. And the fans are great. And look what you get to do with shout and everything. I think it doesn't hurt at the very least. And it's got to help at least a bit. Or I don't think they would do it. So Lanning is just, like, I keep loving this guy more by the day. Keep loving him more by the day. Absolutely fantastic. Premier, top shelf motivator. If you haven't seen it, by all means, go check it out. YouTube, Twitter, wherever. It's absolutely awesome. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Who do you want? Who do you want? Who's your top priority for Oregon going into National Signing Day? I should have answered that question. Oh, why did I come up with that? I'll answer it briefly right after we talk about somebody. We're going to talk about Penn State even more too, because there's more to know. So you're going to have to stick around because there's a lot coming up. Coming up right now is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Maybe it's Oregon to win outright. Maybe it's Oregon to win and cover 3.5. That's what they're favored by, because Penn State's a darn good football team, and they deserve your respect. Despite their inability historically to win big games, they deserve your respect. They are a good team. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So which player would I most like to have? I have legitimately not pondered this thought specifically until I am recording the show. The show's not live, but this is kind of a live element, so that's kind of my thinking here. That Oregon doesn't currently have committed. I'd probably go with Jakeem Stewart. Yeah. Because look at this defensive line. It's going to be sick next year, too. They're going to lose some key guys, of course. Birch and Caldwell and probably Harmon, unless we throw, I don't know, $1 million at Derek Harmon and say, come play for the Ducks for your senior season. But that is just clearly such a foundational part of what makes this defense click. Remember, they had 18 sacks in a season in 2022, and the defense gave up 27 points a game. Now they're giving up less than 17 points a game. They just had 10 sacks in a single game. So if I could only get one of the 5-star guys that I listed earlier that Oregon doesn't currently have committed, I'd probably go with Jakeem Stewart. That'd be my answer there. So let's get back into Penn State for a moment. Got some questions from Locked On Ducks insiders, which you can become as well. You can get a free 14-day trial with the link below. You get priority mailbag access. You get all sorts of other perks as well. And a couple of you sent in questions about, hey, who should we know on Penn State? What's an area where Penn State could actually have an advantage? Well, I've got answers to both those questions. The second one is simpler. The second one is Penn State's running attack has been more consistent this year than Oregon's. Now, how did they fare against this Oregon defense? I've got a lot of confidence in Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi's unit on that side of the ball. But they go for about 195 per game on the ground with two really good backs, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. These guys have been at Penn State for several years. They are veterans. This has been a recruiting class that Penn State fans have talked about for a while. This has been the year where they circle and go, that's kind of the year. And it looks like it could be the year for Penn State. Yeah, they lost to Ohio State. They didn't get blown out. This wasn't Indiana at Ohio State. They're losing by 23 points. No, this was just Penn State came up a little bit short. They had a goal-to-go situation. Ohio State's defense came up with a stand. They've been really good in the red zone this year. Ohio State's defense, that is. But Nick Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, a couple of really good backs. Those are guys to know. I mentioned Tyler Warren earlier. Drew Aller at the quarterback spot is capable. He is not the best quarterback Oregon has seen this year. Who is the best quarterback? I've got the door open to my office, and somehow Google's version of Siri heard me say that. It's in the kitchen. How did that? Okay, that was crazy. That was crazy. I was like, who's this woman talking? Oh my gosh. AI, man. It's taking over. All right. Drew Aller is incredibly capable. He is someone who might not have the most spectacular college career all the time or put up these crazy wild numbers, but then you look up and he's had like a 10-year career in the NFL as a backup. He could totally be that sort of guy. So he's got plenty of arm talent. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and he's been with Penn State for the last couple of years. New offensive coordinator this year, of course, but they've made things work in a big way, especially with Tyler Warren. And I'd approach this if I were defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoy or co-DC Chris Hampton, who's not going to Florida State, by the way, because they hired Nebraska's defensive coordinator. I would come out with a game plan of let's force Drew Aller to throw on the perimeter. Like what Ohio State did against Oregon, what they tried against Oregon, it failed, of course, but what they tried against Oregon, that's what I would do. Don't give them the middle of the field to throw the ball. That's where a tight end usually does most of his damage. And try to take away the rushing attack and say, you know what? We're going to leave you one-on-one on the outside with corners. Play plenty of single high safety, bring an extra guy down in the box to help stop the run, and take away Tyler Warren on any sort of route that he wants to do. And just say, hey, Nico Reed, Jabbar Muhammad, go win us this game. Go make Drew Aller throw the ball outside the numbers and take deep shots down the field. They haven't done it consistently. So that's where I'd come at it. And is Aller capable? Yes, absolutely. I think he's kind of in the Luke Altmaier mold. I think those guys are pretty similar. Aller's a little bit better. Aller's been a little bit better, but Altmaier and Illinois have been solid this year as well. But I think when you watch him, those guys are pretty similar. Aller doesn't run as much as Altmaier does, but I think that throwing-wise is a pretty good comp. Drew Aller could deliver an absolute dud. Wouldn't surprise me. He'd go for 272 touchdowns. Also wouldn't surprise me. He's got a pretty low ceiling, but he's got a pretty darn high floor as well. So those are a couple of guys to know. And then defensively, Abdul Carter might be the first edge rusher taken in the draft. And Oregon's offensive line is one of the 3 finalists for the Joe Moore Award. I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily expect to see that. I think they were worthy of being one of the 12 finalists. I didn't think they'd get to this point, but why has that been the case? Why are they outperforming my expectations for that award? It's the 2 tackles. It is Josh Connerly, who had a ridiculous PFF game, or grade rather, in the game against Washington. It is Josh Connerly. It is a Johnny Cornelius. And going into that Ohio State game, what were we talking about? Well, Ohio State's got 2 great edge rushers, and there are 2. There's a former 5-star on the other side of the Penn State defensive line. Abdul Carter's going to get most of the attention, though. Why was the Ohio State game such a big statement? Because Dylan Gabriel wasn't sacked. And Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau and Tyleik Williams on the interior of that defensive line, that's one of the 5 best defensive lines in all of college football. And Dylan Gabriel wasn't sacked, and Oregon ran the ball pretty well. So Abdul Carter's a guy who you've got to take away. Let me rephrase that. You have to... I'm going to rephrase it again. Sorry, it's been a long day. Brain's a little mushy as I'm recording the show. Only just a tad. You cannot allow Abdul Carter the opportunity to take over the game. You cannot do that. He is that sort of player. He is Mateo, but a more polished version and a more explosive version. Mateo, if he has another step forward and has another great season, he's a top 10 pick. He's a top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL draft. Abdul Carter is a top 10 pick right here, right now, 2025. He's going to come off the board. So I think that the NFL caliber tackles that Oregon's got, they had their best game of the season against Ohio State because they were going up against the best competition. Now they've got to do it again. They've got to have a game like they did against Michigan, where, again, Dillon Gabriel wasn't sacked and Oregon ran the ball well. They've got to have a game like Ohio State, where Dillon Gabriel's not sacked and Oregon runs the ball well. You do that, they'll win and they'll cover the 3.5. But there are plenty of keys. I'll lay out more of my keys on Friday's show. I had more mailbag questions to get to, but I don't want to shortchange any of them. Tomorrow is going to be the crossover with Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions. So Friday's show, I got a question from one of you about managing the portal amidst the playoff push. I got a question from Barry about Evan Stewart. I got a question from In the Sticks with Nix about Notre Dame and the playoff. I will save all of that for Friday's show. Hope you tune in. I will see you next time, everybody. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, as always, and have a wonderful rest of your day. What's that other thing? Oh, that's right. Go Ducks.